when my daughter Victoria looked me in the eyes and said, "Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now," I felt something inside me break and then quietly reform into steel. After 43 years of marriage and decades of devoted motherhood, I was being thrown out of my own home like an old piece of furniture. I packed my bags without argument, the obedient mother I had always been. 3 days later, I sat in a lawyer's office discovering that my husband Robert had been playing the longest game of chess in history. Victoria was about to learn that sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. 2 months earlier, I was Margaret Sullivan, grieving widow of 43 years. When Robert died suddenly of a heart attack, Victoria swooped in like a vulture wearing designer clothes. She offered fake concern and suggestions about retirement communities while secretly planning her takeover. She convinced me the big house was too much for me alone with all its memories and maintenance. I should have noticed the cold calculation behind her caring words, but grief had blinded me completely. After the funeral, Victoria became insistent about my future. She brought her husband Kevin for family dinners where they cornered me with real estate pamphlets and brochures for senior facilities. They painted beautiful pictures of me living among people my own age with activities and no responsibilities. What they really meant was getting me out of the way so they could claim everything Robert had built. I was just the inconvenient obstacle between them and millions of dollars. The final blow came on a Tuesday afternoon. Victoria arrived unannounced with Kevin and 2 large suitcases. She announced they were moving into the house immediately because Kevin got a promotion. When I protested that this was still my home, her mask slipped completely. She told me Robert's will left everything to her and she had only been letting me stay out of kindness. Then she delivered the cruelest words I had ever heard from my own daughter. "Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." Those words cut deeper than any knife. 43 years of marriage and motherhood reduced to nothing in one conversation. I packed 43 years of memories into 2 suitcases and a small box of photos while Victoria checked her watch impatiently. Kevin loaded my things into their expensive car like he was disposing of garbage. They dropped me at a cheap motel with $200 in cash like I was a servant who had overstayed her welcome. The Sunset Inn was depressing with thin walls and stained carpet, but it became the place where my awakening began. As I sat on the sagging mattress, I remembered the manila envelope Robert had given me months earlier. He told me to open it only when I felt ready. In my grief, I had forgotten all about it. That envelope would change everything I thought I knew about my life and my family. The next morning, I took a bus to Harrison Fitzgerald's office, Robert's longtime attorney. When I asked about the will Victoria had shown me, Harrison looked genuinely shocked. He revealed there had been a formal reading of the will that I was never invited to attend. Victoria had told him I was traveling and too distraught to participate. The real will was very different from the forged document my daughter had presented. Harrison read Robert's actual will, which left me the family home and 70% of all assets totaling $23 million. Victoria was supposed to receive $10 million in a trust with strict conditions about how she treated me after Robert's death. My husband had known exactly what kind of person our daughter would become. He had prepared legal protections to safeguard me from her greed and entitlement. The clause was crystal clear. If Victoria failed to treat me with respect and dignity, her entire inheritance would revert to me. By forging documents, throwing me out of my house, and telling me to find somewhere to die, she had triggered that clause completely. Victoria had not only lost her inheritance, but had handed it all to me on a silver platter. The irony was so perfect it almost felt like divine justice. Harrison immediately froze all accounts and contacted the police about the fraud. Victoria and Kevin had no idea their carefully planned scheme was unraveling. While they celebrated their new wealth in my house, warrants were being prepared for their arrest. I sat in Harrison's office feeling a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. The woman who had raised Victoria with unconditional love was gone. In her place stood someone who would no longer accept disrespect. That evening, Victoria called me in panic because the bank accounts were frozen. I calmly informed her I was sitting in Harrison Fitzgerald's office reviewing the real will. The silence on the other end was deeply satisfying. For the first time in her life, Victoria realized she had made a catastrophic mistake. She tried to manipulate me again, claiming she was protecting me from financial decisions I couldn't handle. But this time, I wasn't grieving and vulnerable. I was awake. The police arrested Victoria and Kevin within hours. Victoria was taken from an expensive restaurant while celebrating her supposed inheritance. Kevin was arrested at his office the next morning. The charges included fraud, elder abuse, forgery, and attempted extortion. The news spread quickly through our social circle and soon became a local scandal. The daughter who had thrown her mother out was now facing serious prison time. I moved back into my house the same day they were arrested. Victoria had already started redecorating my home with her expensive taste. I packed her designer clothes into garbage bags and left them on the porch. For the first time in decades, I walked through the rooms making decisions based on my own preferences instead of Robert's or Victoria's. The house finally felt like it belonged to me completely. Over the following weeks, I discovered the full extent of Robert's planning. He had updated his will 6 months before his death, specifically because he worried about Victoria's growing entitlement and disrespect toward me. He had seen signs I'd missed while grieving. His love had protected me even after death in ways I never could have imagined. Every document proved he had been watching over our family carefully. Victoria wrote letters from jail begging for forgiveness and claiming she had only been trying to protect me. I read the first few before stopping completely. Her words were still manipulative even behind bars. She hadn't truly changed. She was simply facing consequences for the first time in her privileged life. Some lessons can only be learned through losing everything you thought you deserved. I used part of my inheritance to establish the Margaret Sullivan Foundation for Elder Protection. We provide legal aid and support for seniors facing financial abuse from their own families. My story became a warning and inspiration for many other older women in similar situations. The foundation turned my pain into purpose and my betrayal into something that could help thousands of others. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of my house drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. The woman who had been thrown out with $200 was now a multimillionaire philanthropist with a growing reputation for strength and justice. Victoria and Kevin were both serving prison sentences. Their greed had cost them everything while teaching me I was far stronger than anyone had ever given me credit for. Sometimes I think about the obedient mother I used to be, the one who sacrificed everything for her family without expecting respect or gratitude. That woman died the day Victoria told her to find somewhere else to die. In her place emerged someone who understood her worth and refused to accept disrespect from anyone, including her own daughter. Robert would have been incredibly proud of this version of me. Victoria's children will grow up knowing the truth about what their mother did. I have no intention of hiding her actions or protecting her reputation. They deserve to know that character matters more than money, and that treating family poorly has real consequences. Some bridges, when burned, cannot be rebuilt no matter how many apologies are offered from behind prison walls. The sunset in where I spent my lowest night now feels like a distant memory from another lifetime. I drive past it sometimes and remember the woman who sat on that sagging mattress wondering what she would do next. That woman found strength she never knew she possessed. She discovered that being discarded can be the beginning of becoming unstoppable. Life has a funny way of turning pain into power. My story has been turned into a documentary and potential limited series. I agreed to share it not for revenge, but to warn other families about the dangers of entitlement and elder financial abuse. If my experience can prevent even one other mother from being thrown away like garbage, then every tear and every betrayal was worth it. Some stories need to be told so others don't have to live them. Today I am Margaret Sullivan, no longer defined by being Robert's wife or Victoria's mother. I am a woman who survived betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and more purposeful than ever before. The pawn became the queen through intelligence, courage, and the quiet planning of a husband who loved her more than she ever realized. Victoria taught me the hardest lesson of my life, but I was the one who passed the test. If you're watching this and have experienced similar betrayal from family, know that you are not powerless. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from our lowest moments. Hold on to your dignity and never let anyone convince you that you are useless. The people who discard you often underestimate what you are truly capable of becoming once you stop accepting their disrespect. Thank you for listening to my story of betrayal, awakening, and justice. Subscribe if you want to hear more real-life stories of ordinary people discovering their extraordinary strength. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place and which city you're watching from. Your support means everything as I continue this new chapter of my life.